Imagine a massive, intricate piece of machinery. Like, picture a factory assembly line stretching for a mile.
Right. Or a wildly complex software platform processing millions of financial transactions a second.
Yeah, exactly. And when a system of that magnitude finally grinds to a halt, you expect a spectacle. I mean, you expect a loud explosion, a catastrophic cascade of sparks or alarm bells ringing out across a control room.
You expect it to fail loudly.
Right. You expect this huge dramatic moment, but it almost never does. It stops because one boring 50-cent valve that has been sitting in the dark for 10 years quietly stopped turning.
It is the absolute definition of unexamined dependence.
Yeah.
And looking at the stack of research, the organizational studies, and systems theory analysis we've gathered for today's deep dive, I mean, this is the core thread. We are so conditioned to look at the massive spinning gears of the systems around us, the sheer complexity of our businesses, our supply chains, our daily routines, that we are completely blinded to the tiny, silent things actually holding them together.
We just look right past them.
Exactly. We are looking past the illusion of complexity today. And I want to be clear right up front. Our mission here isn't to find quick fixes or hand you a new 10-step resilience plan.
No, definitely not.
Right. This is an exercise in fundamentally changing how you look at the systems you interact with every single day.
Because the premise we are dealing with here completely flips how we normally conceptualize disaster. We're looking at a very specific pattern across all these disparate fields, from engineering to, like, human resources.
Yeah, the data is really consistent across the board.
It is. The data shows that most systems don't fail because everything breaks all at once. They fail because one small thing does.
It's just one tiny thing.
Right. The research typically categorizes these into 4 areas, right? A supplier, a person, a process step, or a component. Now, in the corporate world, or in engineering, this is often slapped with the label single-point failure.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I hate that term. I really do.
It's a terrible phrase.
It is. Single-point failure sounds like something out of a Hollywood thriller. It sounds like a glowing red self-destruct button behind a glass panel that villains fight over.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the reality outlined in these studies is that these points are usually boring, quiet, and entirely taken for granted. So how does this highly dramatic language we use, words like catastrophe and failure point, actually blind us to the mundane reality of how things break?
Well, it creates a massive cognitive blind spot. I mean, when we use a phrase like single-point failure, our brains immediately search the horizon for something that looks inherently dangerous.
We look for the threat.
Right. We look for the most highly stressed joint on a suspension bridge. We look for the most volatile piece of code in a software update. Or, the high-risk, high-reward supplier.
Yeah, the scary stuff.
Exactly. But what systems theory is telling us is that danger rarely looks dangerous. In fact, systemic danger usually looks incredibly boring.
Boring. Wow.
Yeah. We have to look at the psychology of taking things for granted here. Human attention is a scarce, calorically expensive resource.
Like biologically speaking.
Biologically, our brains are literally wired by evolution to filter out things that are constant and unchanging.
Yeah.
We do this so we can focus on novel threats or new opportunities.
Right, because if you're looking at the tree that hasn't moved, you miss the tiger in the bushes.
Exactly. So if a component or a process or a person is always there and always works without asking for help, our brain categorizes it as part of the background scenery. It becomes invisible.
Think about your own morning routine for a second. You don't actively think about the hot water heater when you step into the shower. You just turn the handle.
You expect hot water.
Yeah. You don't feel your clothes against your skin 10 minutes after you put them on. It's sensory adaptation.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
But what you're saying is that we apply this exact same biological sensory adaptation to how we run a multinational business or a global supply chain.
We absolutely do.
We literally stop perceiving the structural load-bearing pillars of our organizations because they've been functioning silently for so long.
That is precisely what happens. And because a piece of the system becomes psychologically invisible to us, we naturally stop monitoring it.
Right.
We redirect all our managerial energy and our monitoring budget to the loud parts of a system. Think about what gets discussed in boardrooms.
Oh, it's always the new stuff.
Always. It's the new product launches, the major restructuring initiative, the quarterly output metrics. Those are the loud, visible, shiny things.
Because they're moving.
Right. They are constantly changing, so they hold our attention. Meanwhile, the 50-cent valve, the quiet dependency, is just expected to keep doing what it's always done.
Okay, I want to push back slightly here, or at least play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
We do have entire departments dedicated to quality assurance, maintenance, and risk management. I mean, companies spend millions trying to map out their vulnerabilities. Are you suggesting they're just looking at the wrong things?
In many cases, yes. They are looking for complex risks within the cloud systems.
Okay.
They are analyzing what happens if the new software migration fails. They aren't analyzing what happens if the legacy system that everyone ignores suddenly stops working.
They're looking at the shiny new thing that might break.
Exactly. The danger lies in the camouflage of the mundane.
Let's make this camouflage really concrete, because out of those four examples, a supplier, a person, a process step, a component, we can all easily imagine a physical component breaking, like the
Right.
valve.
Right. That's easy to visualize.
But what happens when that quiet, boring, taken for granted part is a person? I really want to dwell on the human element here.
Yeah, this is so important.
Because if a system relies on a quiet dependency, and that dependency has a heartbeat, a mortgage, and a stress threshold, what is the actual day-to-day impact of being that invisible linchpin?
It's one of the most fascinating and, frankly, painful realities inside modern organizations. When the unexamined dependency is a human being, it usually means that person has quietly absorbed a massive amount of structural risk without anyone, including themselves, fully realizing it.
Wow. Absorb structural risk.
Yeah. Think about the person who has been at a mid-sized company for 15 years. They might not have a flashy title. They might be in a mid-level administrative role, maybe operations or accounting.
Just a steady, reliable employee.
Right. But over the years, simply because they are highly reliable, pieces of the workflow have quietly routed themselves through this person's desk. Water flows down the path of least resistance, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And in an office, the path of least resistance is usually the most competent, quietest person.
Right. They become the path of least resistance for everyone else's problem.
Exactly.
Like, they know how to manually fix the invoicing glitch that happens every Tuesday because the software update 3 years ago never fully integrated.
Yes.
Or they know exactly who to call at the vendor when a shipment is delayed because they have a personal relationship with the logistics manager there.
And here is the critical part. Nobody else knows how to do it. It is not in a training manual anywhere.
It's completely undocumented.
It is not formalized. To the rest of the company, the invoices just magically go out on time. The shipments just magically arrive. The company operates under the illusion that it has a highly functional, automated invoicing system.
But in reality, they just have Susan.
In reality, it has Susan, and Susan is the single point failure.
So the system isn't robust at all. It's just riding on the back of Susan's undocumented historical knowledge.
Precisely. And the human impact of this dynamic is profound. I mean, for the organization, as we said, it's a massive unquantified structural risk. But for Susan,
Yeah, how does she feel?
it often leads to a very specific, deep kind of burnout. Because she is an unexamined dependency, she can never truly take a vacation.
Oh, man, I know people exactly like this.
We all do. If she leaves for a week, things immediately start piling up or breaking down. She feels the immense weight of that dependency every single day, even if executive leadership is completely oblivious to it.
Which they usually are.
Right. She is the boring, taken-for-granted linchpin. And the tragedy of this pattern is that when she finally hits her breaking point, burns out, and leaves the company, the system doesn't just experience a minor hiccup.
It shatters.
It
Done.
shatters.
Mhm.
And leadership is left completely baffled, looking at their dashboards, wondering why their robust system just collapsed overnight.
That is such a stark image. We think we have an automated state-of-the-art system, but we actually just have someone pulling levers behind a curtain, and we've collectively forgotten they are even back there.
Exactly.
But this raises a massive question for me. If these quiet dependencies, these everyday routines, these mid-level employees, these legacy suppliers are so critical to whether a system survives or collapses, why on earth do we build systems that are so vulnerable to that?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Why are we engineering fragility into the places where we work and live?
To understand that, we have to look at the tension between efficiency and resilience. This is where we actually start to see the pattern of how these vulnerabilities are engineered over time. It's rarely an accident, and it almost never starts with malicious intent. It is the direct result of pursuing what every business textbook calls a best practice.
Best practice. Okay, I'm listening.
The research notes that when systems are designed strictly for efficiency, dependencies naturally and inevitably narrow.
I want to introduce an analogy here because narrowing dependencies sounds very academic, and we need to make this abstract pattern visible.
Go for it.
Think about packing a suitcase for a long international trip. If your goal is ultimate efficiency, you are going to pack that suitcase perfectly.
Right, you want to use every inch.
Exactly. You roll every shirt tightly, you stuff your socks inside your shoes to use the hollow space, you use those vacuum-sealed packing cubes, and you utilize every single square inch of available volume.
It's very satisfying.
It is a masterpiece of lean optimization. You zip it up, and it fits perfectly in the overhead bin. But because every millimeter is optimized for efficiency, there's absolutely no room for error. If you buy one unexpected souvenir on your trip, or even if the clothes just shift slightly after you unpack and repack at a hotel, the suitcase won't close. The zipper breaks.
Right.
You have optimized away all your tolerance for change. At what point does this kind of lean thinking become a liability rather than an asset?
That analogy perfectly captures the core contradiction we're looking at. Let's pause and look at where the system actually starts to change behavior here.
Right.
When you are packing that suitcase, or when a massive corporation is streamlining its global supply chain, the mindset is entirely focused on eliminating waste.
Because waste is bad, right?
Right. Lean thinking, historically going back to the Toyota production system and early manufacturing revolutions, was about removing steps that didn't add direct value to the end product.
It was a brilliant concept.
It was. But over time, the definition of waste expands.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, redundancy itself starts to look like waste.
I see where this is going. Because redundancy is inherently inefficient. Right. By definition, having a backup means you are paying for or maintaining or storing something that you are not currently using.
Precisely. If you have two suppliers for a critical component, but you only strictly need one to meet your current production quota, the second supplier starts to look like a glaring inefficiency to a financial analyst.
Because you're splitting your order volume.
Exactly.
Yep.
Which means you aren't getting the maximum bulk discount from either. It feels wasteful.
It looks bad on a spreadsheet.
It looks terrible on a spreadsheet. Let's go back to our previous example with Susan.
Poor Susan.
Right. If you have two people trained to do Susan's highly specific job, but there's only enough actual day-to-day work for one Susan, the second person's salary looks like an unnecessary expense dragging down the balance sheet.
So management is going to cut that second role.
Of course they are. The logical, well-intentioned, financially prudent decision is to eliminate the backup. You consolidate to one mega supplier to get the discount. You keep only Susan. You have just successfully narrowed your dependencies. You have packed the suitcase tighter.
But the research uses a chilling phrase here to describe the consequence of that. It says, over time, resilience gets quietly optimized away.
Quietly. That's the key word.
It's not a sudden decision by a villainous CEO to make the system fragile. It's a series of small, logical cuts.
It is death by 1,000 rational decisions. Each decision, taken in complete isolation, makes perfect business sense. It saves $10,000 here. It speeds up the fulfillment process by an hour there.
It makes the system look fantastic on a quarterly earnings report.
It does. But cumulatively, over 5 or 10 years, you are systematically removing all the slack from the system.
Slack is the empty space in your suitcase.
Yes. Slack is the financial buffer, the extra inventory in the warehouse, the cross-trained employee who is currently idle. Slack is what absorbs the shock when things don't go exactly as planned.
Right.
And the crucial second-order effect here is that this optimization happens slowly and invisibly until something changes.
Until an external shock hits.
Yes. The system you built was perfectly optimized for a very specific, stable environment. But environments are never permanently stable.
No, of course not.
We've seen this play out globally over the last decade. A pandemic hits and disrupts the global shipping lanes. A freak snowstorm shuts down a regional transit hub.
Or, on a micro level, Susan simply decides to retire.
Exactly. The environment shifts. And because the system has absolutely no slack left, because resilience was quietly optimized away in the pursuit of higher margins, the system shatters.
It doesn't bend, because bending requires extra room.
Right. Just breaks.
Think about your local grocery store. I mean, we used to have massive stock rooms in the back.
Oh, yeah.
Now the stock room is basically just an unloading dock because of just-in-time logistics. The store relies on trucks arriving exactly when the shelf empties. It's wildly efficient.
It is until it isn't.
Right. If the highway closes for 2 days, the store is completely empty. We traded the safety of the stockroom for the efficiency of the algorithm.
And that trade-off is the invisible architecture of our modern world.
So if this optimization is happening quietly, and if we are slowly, rationally stripping away our safety nets in the name of efficiency without even realizing the danger we're putting ourselves in, it implies a massive failure in how we monitor our environments.
It absolutely does.
Our instruments are failing us. I mean, if a pilot is flying a plane into a storm and all the dials say the weather is clear, you don't blame the pilot, you blame the dashboard.
That's a great point.
This shifts our focus from how systems are built to how we map and monitor them.
And this is where the research draws a profound distinction. It states, and I think this is the most critical takeaway for anyone trying to understand complex organizations, the issue isn't complexity, it's unexamined dependence.
We constantly confuse the two, don't we?
Constantly. When a massive system fails, a bank's IT infrastructure goes down, a supply chain halts, the postmortem almost always blames complexity.
The narrative is always, the system was just too complex to manage, there were too many moving parts.
Exactly. But the evidence argues that complexity is actually a smokescreen. The complex parts are usually the parts we watch the closest.
Right, because we know they're complicated.
Yes. We have millions of dollars of monitoring software watching the complex parts. The failure almost always happens in the simple, unexamined dependencies holding the complex parts up.
Let's use another analogy to pull this apart. Let's look at the modern smart home.
Oh, I love this one.
Let's say you have an incredibly advanced, highly complex smart home. You've got thermal sensors monitoring the temperature in every room, security cameras that use AI facial recognition, automated blinds that adjust themselves based on the angle of the sun.
Sounds expensive.
Right. And a refrigerator that senses when you're out of milk and automatically orders it. It is a marvel of complex interconnected engineering. You could spend years studying how it all integrates.
Absolutely.
But then the entire system completely stops working. You're literally locked out of your own house, freezing, with no milk.
Because of one tiny thing.
Exactly. Why? Because the Wi-Fi router was accidentally unplugged by the family dog.
Yeah.
The router isn't complex. It's a boring $20 plastic box sitting on a dusty shelf.
Right.
But it was an unexamined dependence for the entire $1 million ecosystem.
That is exactly it. The dog unplugging the router is the perfect representation of an informal, chaotic reality destroying a formal, complex system.
It's so frustratingly simple.
It is. And the studies we're looking at point out something deeply troubling about how we map our world. They note how rarely these tiny, critical dependencies ever show up on our organizational charts, our process maps, or our executive dashboards.
I really want to challenge this corporate reliance on data for a second.
Let's do it.
Because in modern business, and frankly, even in how we track our personal habits now, we worship at the altar of the dashboard.
We really do.
We love our metrics. We love our org charts with their neat little hierarchical boxes. We love our process flow diagrams with their beautifully color-coded arrows.
It gives us a sense of control.
Right. But if these tools are supposed to give us a bird's-eye view of reality, to give us ultimate control over the system, why are they so profoundly blind to the things that actually keep the system running? Why didn't the dashboard show the dog near the router?
Because formal mapping tools only measure what they were explicitly designed to measure. They measure the formal system.
Okay, the formal system.
Right. An org chart only tells you who legally reports to whom. It doesn't tell you who actually holds the social influence or the historical knowledge.
It doesn't show you Susan.
Exactly. It doesn't show Susan. A process map tells you the theoretical sequence of events as designed by a consultant in a conference room 5 years ago. A dashboard tells you the current output of a specific, predetermined, tracked metric.
So they're all kind of looking backwards or looking at an idealized version of things.
Yes. None of those formal tools are capable of measuring human habit. They can't measure assumptions.
The research phrases it beautifully here. It says these dependencies let in habits, assumptions, and that's just how we do its logic.
Right. And this brings us to a sociological reality of the workplace. Organizations, and our own personal lives, for that matter, operate simultaneously on two totally different layers.
2 layers.
Yes. There's the formal layer, the rules, the maps, the stated policies, the employee handbook. And then there is the informal layer, the actual ground-level reality of how work truly gets done on a Tuesday afternoon.
The real world.
The real world. The formal layer is what we measure. The informal layer is what we rely on.
Okay, let's go back to Susan, our unexamined human dependency. Let's look at a specific scenario. Let's talk about the Friday spreadsheet.
Perfect example.
So the formal process map for her department says, System A generates data, System B ingests data, weekly report is generated.
Nice and clean.
Right. That's what the executive dashboard sees. Everything looks green.
But the informal reality, the actual lived experience on the floor, is that System A's data output is always slightly corrupted due to a legacy code error.
Of course it is.
So every Friday at 4:00 p.m., Susan spends 30 minutes manually reformatting the columns before System B can accept it.
And let me guess, she's never written this down.
Never.
It's totally undocumented. It's just a habit she developed years ago to make the pain go away.
It is pure, that's just how we do it logic. Susan doesn't even think to report it to IT anymore because 5 years ago, IT told her it would take 6 months to fix, so she just created a workaround.
And workarounds just become permanent fixtures.
Workarounds become habits, and habits become the invisible operating system of the company. It's just part of her Friday.
Right.
But if Susan is out sick with the flu, System B suddenly rejects the corrupted data, the critical report isn't generated, and the executive team panics because their dashboard just went blank.
And what do?
They will immediately look at the complex systems.
Naturally.
They will tear apart System A and System B, bringing in highly paid engineers to find a massive software failure. They are actively looking for a loud failure.
They're looking for the explosion.
Exactly. They won't see the missing 30 minutes of manual human habit because habit doesn't generate a server log. Habit doesn't show up on a process map.
That is terrifying.
It really is.
We spend all our time, our energy, and our IT budgets trying to manage the complex, highly visible parts of our world, entirely ignoring the simple, unexamined dependencies holding the complex parts up.
We are polishing the hood of the car while the engine is held together with twine.
That's exactly it. But here's where it gets really interesting, and frankly, where human psychology gets a little counterproductive.
Okay.
Once you realize this, once you understand that the massive machinery of your life or your team or your business is actually held together by invisible habits, duct tape, and unexamined dependencies, the natural human instinct is to panic.
Yes. The immediate instinct is to seize control.
Exactly. You want to lock everything down immediately. I mean, I hear this and I want to go map every single habit in my life. I want to buy 3 backup Wi-Fi routers for the smart home. I want to force Susan to document her Friday afternoon workflow in triplicate and train 3 other people to do it.
That's the normal reaction.
But the source material explicitly and repeatedly warns us against that reaction. He says, this isn't about fixing everything or adding protection everywhere.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive.
It makes no logical sense at first glance. Why is the research telling us not to fix the very vulnerabilities it just spent all this time exposing? What is the hidden danger in overcorrecting?
Because overcorrecting is a trap that leads you right back to extreme complexity.
Okay, unpack that for me.
If you try to fix everything, if you try to build a redundant backup for every single dependency you uncover, you are suddenly creating massive, compounding layers of new systems.
And new systems mean?
New maintenance. Think about what adding protection everywhere actually entails in the real world.
Let's play it out. Let's say you identify a dependency on the municipal power grid for a manufacturing facility.
Right. You found a massive quiet dependency. The grid is always there until it isn't. So you decide to fix it by purchasing an enormous commercial backup generator.
Makes sense.
You install it, you feel safer, the dashboard says you have backup power.
Check mark on the risk assessment.
Exactly. But what have you actually done? You haven't eliminated risk, you've just transmuted it. You've introduced a whole new set of dependencies.
What kind of dependencies?
Well, the generator needs fuel. The fuel goes bad if it sits in the tank too long, so it needs to be chemically treated or rotated.
Oh, wow.
Right. The generator needs a strict mechanical maintenance schedule. The automatic transfer switch, the computer that tells the generator to turn on when the grid fails, needs to be tested monthly. Who is going to do all that?
I think we both know the answer to that.
Yeah.
It's Susan.
Exactly. Susan, or someone exactly like her, is now in charge of the generator maintenance log on top of her regular duties.
Which she probably won't have time for.
And here is the paradox of safety. Because the generator is a backup, it's not part of the daily core business operations, which means over time, it becomes boring.
It was quiet.
It slips into the background. People stop checking the maintenance logs because there's always a more urgent fire to fight. The fuel goes bad.
And then the storm hits.
And 3 years later, when the municipal power finally fails during a storm, the generator doesn't start.
Wow.
By trying to fix the dependency with a hardware solution, you didn't create resilience, you just created a new, unexamined dependency on maintenance habits. Adding endless protection creates new layers of maintenance, which themselves become the new single-point failures.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a cut, but then you have to monitor the Band-Aid for infection,
Yeah.
and then you need a system to monitor the person checking the Band-Aid.
It scales infinitely.
So if we can't just ignore these vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
but we also shouldn't obsessively try to fix them all because that just creates more fragility, where does that leave us? What is the actionable takeaway if the action isn't fix it?
It leaves us with the central philosophical thesis of the research.
Which is?
The focus must be on awareness, not immediate action. The goal is, as the text explicitly states, noticing which small things quietly control outcomes.
Noticing.
Yes, it's about moving from a state of unconscious reliance to a state of conscious, examined reliance. You don't have to eliminate every risk. In fact, you can't, but you absolutely must know which risks you are carrying in your backpack.
That makes a lot of sense. The research actually gives us 3 specific reflection questions to help teams and individuals do exactly this.
Yeah, those are great.
I want to really dig into them because they reframe the whole issue. The first one is this designed or accidental? That feels like a massive, vital distinction.
It is the difference between strategic vulnerability and careless vulnerability.
You mean example?
Let's look at relying on a single supplier, since that's a classic example. If you sit down with your executive team, look at the entire supply chain map and say, look, supplier X in Taiwan is the only company in the world that can provide this microchip at the required quality.
Okay, acknowledging the reality.
Right. If their factory goes down, we halt production entirely. We acknowledge and accept this risk because the technological upside of using their chip is worth the vulnerability, and we will monitor their regional stability closely.
That is a design dependency.
Exactly. You have examined the risk, weighed the trade-offs, accepted it, and planned your psychological and financial reaction around it.
It's a conscious choice. You're
Yeah.
driving the car isn't driving you.
Yes, but an accidental dependency happens entirely through organizational drift. It's completely unconscious. You started using a local supplier Y 5 years ago simply because their warehouse was down the street.
It was convenient at the time.
Right. You just never bothered to look for an alternative when you scaled up. Now, 5 years later, they provide 80% of your critical components, not because you chose them strategically after a market analysis, but because of sheer inertia.
You just coasted into it.
The reliance has never been questioned. The danger isn't necessarily the fact that you have a single supplier. The danger is that the reliance is entirely accidental. You are carrying a bomb you don't know you have.
And this connects perfectly to the next question the study suggests we ask. Who actually knows this dependency exists? This strikes right at the heart of the danger of siloed knowledge.
We touched on this with Susan and her Friday spreadsheet.
Right.
If a quiet dependency exists, but only one person at the very bottom of the organizational chart knows it exists, it's an unmanaged risk.
Because if she leaves, the knowledge leaves.
Exactly. The goal of noticing isn't to punish Susan for not documenting her work. It's about bringing these silent dependencies into the collective awareness of the group.
Getting it out of her head and under the table.
Yes. It's moving the reality of the informal system up into the light so it can be acknowledged by the formal system. Again, you might not fix it.
Right.
You might decide that having Susan spend 30 minutes on Friday is cheaper than $1 million IT overhaul. But leadership needs to know that the process requires 30 minutes of a manual duct tape to function.
Because if you don't know it exists, you can't protect it.
Exactly.
I mean, if leadership doesn't know Susan is the glue holding the reporting system together, they might accidentally fire her because they optimized her role away on a spreadsheet looking for cost savings.
It happens all the time.
They cut what they thought was waste and accidentally cut the central artery of the department.
Exactly. Which brings us to the mature approach to systems thinking.
Oh, what does that look like?
The goal is not achieving perfect resilience. Perfect resilience is an illusion.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't. A perfectly resilient System 1 with triple backups for every component, infinite slack, and total documentation would be infinitely expensive to build and entirely too slow to operate.
It would be paralyzed by its own armor.
That's a great way to put it. The goal is shifting your relationship with your systems. It's understanding that the quiet, boring parts are actually carrying the weight and giving them the respect they deserve.
We've covered an incredible amount of conceptual ground today.
We really have.
We started by looking at the myth of the loud failure, how our systems don't die with a theatrical explosion, but rather through the quiet collapse of a boring 50-cent valve, a neglected habit, or an exhausted middle manager.
The invisible pillars.
Right. We explored how our endless capitalistic pursuit of efficiency, packing the suitcase perfectly tight to eliminate waste, slowly and silently optimizes away our resilience, leaving us incredibly brittle to any sudden change in the weather.
The efficiency trap.
Yeah, we saw how the formal tools we trust to map our reality, our org charts and our polished dashboards, are completely blind to the actual informal habits and workarounds that hold everything together.
They just can't see the reality on the ground.
And we've landed on this crucial, counterintuitive tension. We cannot try to fix every vulnerability without creating a nightmare of new complexity and new maintenance.
It just makes things worse.
So we must instead master the art of noticing. We must map the invisible, not to obsessively control it, but to truly understand what is holding our world up.
It requires a profound shift in attention. It requires actively looking away from the loud, the complex, the expensive, and the dramatic, and forcing yourself to stare at the mundane.
The boring stuff.
The really boring stuff. You have to learn to see the invisible structures of your day. And the research we've explored leaves us with one final, incredibly potent question to help initiate that shift.
What is it?
It's a simple question. If this stopped for a week, what else would stop?
Wow. If this stopped for a week, what else would stop?
Right. I want you to take that question and look at your own life, your own team, or your own work today. Don't try to change anything. Don't write a new policy. Don't rush out to buy a backup system.
Just observe.
Just look for the quietest, most boring part of your day. The person, the habit, the simple tool that is always there. Look at that quiet dependency and ask yourself, is your reliance on this design or is it completely accidental?